Today we are diving into our series that we do every year called Welcome to the Family. And today we have Ashley Fuhr joining us, and she's going to share how God has built her family through the work of adoption and foster care. And I'm so glad you're here. So tell us just a little bit about yourself, Ashley, what your days look like, how you like to spend them, and who you spend them with.
All right. Well, I'm so happy to be here. I just wanted to say thank you to kick us off. This is just an exciting thing that you do, and I'm so grateful that you invited me and for me to tell about my family. I actually work for the local church. I'm an admin over adult education. So, overarchingly, my days look like sitting in an office and getting people plugged in at the church and being a part of their discipleship experience and getting to know the Lord. But outside of that, I'm a wife and mom. And, I do some other things, but God has really blessed our family. I started out as a lady who had one child, and I'm an only child and thought, I turned out half decent, so he'll probably be okay. Um,
More than
and
half decent.
And so I was really adamant that I didn't want any more children. And a lot of people asked my husband Russell and I, when are you guys going to have more kids? And we were just really sure that we weren't. And so for 5 years, I told everybody, I'm a one and done mom. We're good. Our family feels complete. And God was laughing that entire time because he knew what he had in store for us. Um, and in very short version, he called us to foster care. And so we walked through that process and invited children into our home. We've had two placements. Our first placement we knew was temporary, two boys, 7 and 8. They stayed with us for a month and we transitioned them on to a home where they could be with their sister. Trying to get siblings together is a huge part of foster care. And after that, we took in a boy and a girl who were half siblings, and they were 4 and 17 months old. A year later, their mom had a baby, and so we welcomed their sister into our home. And we are now about 3.5 years in. They still live with us. So we have been fostering that sibling set of three for 3.5 years.
Yeah. I want to dive more into that, but just to bring everyone up to speed a little bit too, the how we first met was really through this podcast, and then months later, and we met face to face at our home church. And I didn't even know at the time that you made earrings, but I remember you wearing just the cutest ones. And then you told me a little bit about how you started your business to help support your family's mission with foster care. And so driving home, I just could not stop thinking about how cute they were, but also I just knew I had to have a pair. And I'm actually wearing them today. I
I
just
love
love
it.
these. I get so many compliments on these earrings. They're just so
Oh,
fun. But I want you to tell us just a little bit more of how that came about too, and
yeah,
how like
absolutely.
just the creativity with earrings,
Yeah.
and what you kind of talked about starting your journey, that like you were one and done. And so
Yes.
kind of take us back to those initial days, and when God first laid on your heart, how he prepared your husband's heart, and what that looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, scrolling social media, is that
Uh-huh.
how God talks to us? I don't know.
He can. He can.
But
Yeah.
I saw a story about these two boys. And one of the boys, I believe, was 5 years old, and the other one was 17. And they were brothers, and they were trying to keep them together because the 17-year-old was about to age out of the system, and he had severe autism. He was nonverbal. And so he was going to have to go to a state funded home when he turned 18 and aged out of foster care. And my heart was just so burdened for those boys and how they'd been through so much together. And honestly, the abuse had been happening in their home for such a long time. But because the oldest was nonverbal, nobody knew until the younger brother went to school
Mm.
and a teacher was able to kind of observe what was happening in their home. And I just begged God that he would let me be a part of those boys' lives, that whether that was connecting them to a family or being their mom, which was very foreign to the lady who was one and done, like I just felt
Uh-huh.
this strong burden for these boys. Um, and God said no. And kind of just a little bit before that, just to give you some background, I had been praying for a year and a half that whatever God would have me do, that I would say yes. So I knew that God was preparing at least me, but I really thought our family for something huge, and I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like when I had that revelation that God said I wasn't praying big enough prayers. And so I started just really praying big prayers like, God, let me see people the way that you see them. And that doesn't sound so big at first, but when you really think about it, like letting the Lord see other people the way that he sees them is a big prayer.
It's going to be
And
inconvenient to you.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
And so I just started saying, God, whatever it is you're preparing me for, I'm ready. I wasn't ready. I prayed that prayer for a year and a half as he prepared my heart and
Yeah.
prepared the heart of my family. Um, but when God told me no to those boys, I was just heartbroken. And I thought, man, God, I thought this was the thing. Like, I thought this was the big thing that you had for me. I cannot stop thinking about this. And so a couple weeks later, sure enough, I'm scrolling and another boy that was my son's age pops up. And I sent it to my husband and just said, this boy is so cute. And he said, do you have this overwhelming sense of no or not right now that you normally feel like when we're talking about foster care or adoption? Because we had kind of always seen adoption as a part of our story, but probably when our son was older, we thought we would take in teenagers because they're so hard to place.
Mhm.
And so many people um, they don't want to take teenagers because they come with so much baggage and so much trauma, and that it's intimidating to people.
Right.
And so we always thought, when our son was older, that we would either have a natural opportunity with one of his friends to be a safe place, or he would call us into traditional foster care and that we would foster teenagers. And so when he asked that question, I mean, so wise, I just thought about it and I said, well, no, I don't have this strong sense of no. And so he said, okay, we're going to take 1 week and we're going to go pray. You're going to go pray about it. I'm going to go pray about it. We are not going to talk about this for a week. And we're
Mhm.
going to come together and see like where the Lord has brought us.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great idea. And in typical Russell and Ashley fashion, by the end of the week, we had signed up with an agency, been fingerprinted, started our background checks, and
Wow.
scheduled like our first home study
Mhm.
visit. So,
Yeah.
and we just decided like that God was knocking on the door and that we were going to say yes to the next step until God put up a roadblock or he put kids in our home.
Yeah.
And we made it till he put kids in our home. And it has been the most remarkable journey.
Wow. Well, I love too how you said that you felt this burden, and I think that so many times we have this question like, what's God's will for my life? Like we want to have purpose, we want to have meaning, and we're just kind of like searching for it, looking for it. But a lot of times it comes through a need. And for you, it was scrolling on social media. You weren't like even
Yeah,
looking into foster care. You just
no,
saw a need. And then with it came this burden, and it turned out to be from God, that he was preparing your heart. He was filling you with compassion for this. And it looked different than you initially thought. You thought it might be those teenage boys, but I think that so many parts of your story, that there's people listening to this right now and just they have something else that God's laying on their heart, or they're wondering, what am I supposed to do with my life? How can I have meaning and significance in someone else's life? And I think a lot of times it does start with that need and just awareness, but surrendering to it. And I
yeah,
think there's a lot of courage in the year and a half before all of this started in those prayers, of saying, God, I'm going to trust you. Help me to pray big prayers for my family and
yeah.
not
And he
limit
was,
what you can do.
yeah, he was training us. He was training me because this road is not an easy one.
Yeah.
And as you learn to pray those big prayers and you learn to vocalize that, Lord, I will trust you no matter what it is that you bring to me. When you're in the middle of this space of vulnerable children and vulnerable families, there are times when you think, what on earth have I done?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but also knowing that like God brought me here and he's got me and he will give me just enough for today. And that's enough. I
Right.
think so often we're conditioned to prepare and hoard, and whether that's resources or skills, in order to prepare ourselves for things. And sometimes God says, bring me what you have. If
Mm-hmm.
you bring me what you have, I can multiply it to be whatever it is I need it to be. But you have to be obedient to just bring me what you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's been the biggest lesson for me over the last 3.5 years is as a doer and a type A, I like to have a plan and a plan B and a plan F. I
Yes,
like to have all the
yes, me
contingencies
too.
worked out. And that's not how God works. He's got it figured out. He doesn't have a plan A, B, or C, but we have to let him work and we have to give him what we have so that he can move in our lives. And so it's just been incredible. I will never be the same. Those kids have done more for me than I could ever do in a lifetime of loving them.
I love that. And as you're talking, I'm just thinking of Moses, like, bring me what you have. He had this staff, and I can't remember where it is, maybe in Exodus. I don't know. Correct me if you know. But where, they're in battle and God's telling them, lift the staff up. And when they lifts the staff, then the army wins. But whenever it falls, then the opposing army takes over. And so through that story, we see that it's like, just bring me what you have, that this is the banner. And I'm sure that the other team, the SA team, the other army, they had a banner that would have been like this big grand thing to have. And all Moses had was a staff. That was it. But bring me what you have and lift it up to me. Surrender. That in that place that he was, it was this posture of surrender. Both hands up. He had to keep both hands raised in order to receive the victory. And a lot of times it was too much for him to do by himself. He had to have others come and actually lift his arms up, keep them in the air, but to keep that posture of surrender. And I just see that that's what you've done, that you said that each day is hard, but we can only face it one day at a time. And God gives you what you need. He brings support. He brings your husband. He brings other people to come help you through this and in this mission. And so I'm curious, there's a lot of families that maybe they've just started this process. Maybe they're thinking about it. Maybe now hearing your story, they're feeling some compassion and feeling a burden for some, to maybe look into this. And so what could you tell them? What have you learned? What did you wish you knew when you started this? And then also tell us some of those challenges that came blending a family, because that is different. And yeah.
I think you just don't know what you don't know. And part of this journey is you cannot be trained enough. You
Yeah.
can't be told enough. Part of it is just getting your feet wet. And so while I don't think that everybody is called to foster care, I do think everyone is called to the orphan. And
Mm,
so God may not call you to open your home, but he may call you to walk alongside somebody who has and be that support system and be the person who's lifted them up. Um, they may call you to be the one who drops a meal on a hard day or mow the lawn when time runs out, all those little things that God can use to help someone else. We have had so many of those stories and so many of those things where people have just popped in and been blessings to us on really hard days. And it's been a wonder to really see God's community in action and see that love happen. Um, but if you are interested in opening your home and looking more about it, it really depends on where you live. Every state looks different and has different routes to open their home to foster care, but there's always a state agency. I would definitely look into that first and see what their requirements are. In Oklahoma, there are actually second party agencies that you can go through. And so my husband and I have gone through a Christian agency and they help with other support things that the state does not. Like when the baby came, surprise, there's a
yeah.
baby. Do you want to take another one?
Yeah.
We had my son's old crib, but we had gotten rid of the crib mattress. And so they had one. And so they brought one. And so they're just a really great resource to help and to be almost a buffer between us and the state agency when we're lost. And,
Yeah.
they take for granted that everybody knows this. And we're like, we have never done this before. And so they've been a really great help. And so I would research local agencies. And as you do that, most communities are pretty close and pretty small. And so if you can tap into another foster family or a foster resource at your church, those people will have a wealth of knowledge for what is happening in your area and how best to connect and how to take the next step.